today's presenter. Mike Gordon is with Sixel Consulting Group, and Mike works with airport and airline clients on a variety of air service strategy and air service development projects. Mike has over 30 years of aviation industry experience. He has spent time with Allegiant Air, where he served as Director of Pricing and Revenue Management. He began his career with Frontier Airlines, and in the meantime, he also has invested his time with U.S. Airways and AirTran. Mike currently is, as the slide indicates, responsible for air service strategy and development with Sixel Consulting Group. And so without further ado, Mike Gordon.
Thank you, Michael. And again, thank you for you and the CUTR Group to invite me in to give this presentation. And as I go through the slides, this is just basically a high level, not to get too far into the weeds, but a high level overview of attracting and securing air service. But to better understand that, you need to go back and take a look at what's going on with the trends and changes over the past couple decades. So as we go through it, I want to give you an idea of what we'll be talking about. Today's agenda: discuss the state of the industry, the air service trends within the domestic marketplace, network changes. This is, again, on a high level, network being the different carriers across the spectrum, and then naturally attracting and securing air service. So you can't talk about the industry without understanding the cost structure, because it's all about the cost. And here it just trends out over the past 2 decades, listing what the fuel price was back in the early to mid-90s at just below 50 cents a gallon. And then the industry spiked up nearly $4 a gallon in the 2008 era. And then they came down. And then right now, the new norm, for the most part, the entire year, we've been sitting at just below $3 per gallon on the value for the price points that's out there. So as you see that, you'll see how changes affect those. You take a look at 2008, and then over the past 3 years, where it's pretty well leveled out at just above or below $3. You'll see why things have taken place, the changes out there. So because of fuel spiking and going up, and now you can see that it's a little blurred, but it's just shy of 40% is the airline expense. So it's the largest expense out there, but you go back 2 decades ago, that the expense was only 10 to 12% across the system. So as the prices go up, well, what happens is airlines are out there. Most importantly, is they're out there to maximize the profit potential and at the same time minimize the loss on other opportunities. But with fuel, as it goes up to 40%, well, you've got to find new avenues of revenue production, hence ancillary. You go back 20 years ago, and there was no such thing as far as ancillary. But now, as you get into the current state of the industry, certain carriers, what used to be just a couple dollars per passenger on ancillary, well, certain carriers are getting up there into the $40 to $50 range per passenger each direction. Well, they're doing that to help offset fuel costs as well as opportunities in the marketplace of what they actually can charge. So that right there stands out. Now, as you go into it, well, because of cost, well, what happens? We'll go back to 1978. 1978 is when the industry was deregulated. Back then, you had a network of trunk carriers. The trunk carriers, at that point, you had United, American, would be considered trunk. You had national carriers, which would be like a Frontier, and you had regional carriers, which at that point may have been more like a PSA or AirCal. Well, the industry goes into the mid-'80s, and you look at 1986. At that point, you had carrier after carrier after carrier merging. Back in 1986, they announced the Republic Northwest merger, the Western Delta merger, the AirCal American and PSA Piedmont and U.S. Air mergers. So then you go back, as you go forward, more consolidation in the 90s, and then naturally what you see today is the fact you look at you got basically 4 major carriers that have the brunt majority of the seats. out there in the marketplace. Right now, the New American is a number of carriers out there that now become, right now, American. So as we go through this, we'll talk about American Airlines, but it does include the U.S. Airways metal. So, but this all falls under the American umbrella until they merge the two carriers together at some point in the next year and a half. So right now you can see that you got these four major carriers, and of those, here it lays out the U.S. capacity, domestic U.S. capacity. So those four, from American, Delta, Southwest, and United, they basically are representing nearly 85% of the total seats throughout the entire domestic U.S. marketplace. And then you can see the likes of Spurred and Frontier, major players with ancillary and growing their markets, but as a comparable, much smaller than the ones that stand out of American, Delta. And then all others would be the likes of, say, Republic and Allegiant fall into that level. So then, what's happened over time? Well, if you go back, again, it's all based on trends. You go back 20 plus years ago versus today, well, 20 plus years ago, you barely had a regional type jet out there. Well, now demand has changed, and basically a quarter of the capacity out there flying in the domestic U.S. is done on a regional jet, 50 seat or smaller. And you look at the other areas within the world, you look at the global sector, Europe, Middle East, South America, nothing comes close. You can see that we definitely use the small regional jet more so than any other sector of the industry. So as we talk about the domestic industry view, low-cost carriers continue to grow. Large airlines, because of mergers, cost reduction, and getting rid of excess capacity, they're very stable and with very limited growth right now. American Airlines, because of the merger with U.S. Airways, they're in the process of basically connecting the dots. They're going to cities that may not have been flown before because they got American or U.S. Airways may be in that city, so they're going to start flying to other destinations. Case in point is Charlotte to Oklahoma City, Charlotte to Tulsa. These are markets that have never been flown before on U.S. Airways side, but because of the merger, American has an operation in both Oklahoma City and Tulsa, so now they can connect the dots. That's going to happen and continue to happen, not unlike what Delta and Northwest had done following their merger, as well as United Continental. So the other thing that stands out is the same thing that Southwest is doing with their merger with AirTran. At some point later this year, they'll be under one operating certificate, so they'll just be known as, at that point, Southwest Airlines. The transition, we talked about that. Larger regional jets will continue to come into the marketplace. What used to be the smaller 37, 44, 50-seat RJs, they're being replaced with the 70 to 80 seat range regional jets. And then the one thing that really stands out is the last bullet point on this slide. Fuel prices remain stable. Well, the fact is it is still high compared to what was out years ago, but if they remain stable, then the airlines can plan for that. So then you've got the different airlines out there in the marketplace. Again, we talked about the large global network carriers of American, Delta, United, the ultra low cost, otherwise known as less than daily, Allegiant, Spurred, Frontier, and your traditional low cost carriers like the Southwest, JetBlue, and then your regional like SkyWest or Cape Air. And these are just, I'm just listing out a couple, so I'm not trying to exclude any others, it's just these are ones that I want to make mention to. All four of these different business models are viable, are very profitable for the most part, but the ones that really stand out are the ultra low cost carriers, less than daily, and the large global because of the size and the scope and the presence they have. So the ultra low cost, because they have such a low cost of operating, they can go into certain markets and operate a couple days a week and be very profitable. And those are the things that stand out is the ultra low cost carriers, the likes of Allegiant and Spurred. Frontier is coming online more and more, but they tend to look at markets as they have to, each market needs to be profitable, but it's got to be a double-digit operating margin to be definitely remain in their marketplace and on their route map. And because of that, you'll definitely see that the ultra-low-cost carriers will grow more throughout the foreseeable future. The likes of Frontier and Allegiant as well as Spurred continue to grow, and we'll talk about that here shortly. So again, we talked about the financial stability. Because of the mergers, they've gotten rid of excess capacity. You look at the more rational and what used to be a market share-driven industry, they're now more apt to control where they can be very profitable because at the end of the day, you might be very good at market share, but if you're not making money on a per unit basis, you can't make it up in volume. And a prime example, it goes back to the early 90s. I didn't date myself, but you go back to the early 90s. At that point, you had 4 different airlines flying mainline jets hourly between LA and San Francisco. United every hour, US Air at that point every hour, American, and then Delta flying every hour. Well, then to get more market share, United went to every half hour. Well, at the end of the day, the carriers start to pare down some of the excess flying. As they basically start to pull down some of the excess flying, it allowed other carriers at that point to go in and start to build up and gain opportunities in that place. So at the point that a lot of the West Coast flying was brought down, will allow Southwest to start to grow to California. So there's always an upside following up airlines when they start to reduce service. Again, the good thing about it is the majority of carriers are very profitable for several years now because of they're truly right-sizing, tweaking the schedule, and they're making sure that the capacity matches demand. When you have that in place, well, then you can really control your opportunities moving forward. The other thing is the money-losing hubs, for the most part, have been eliminated. Look at the fact that a lot of these carriers, because of merger, they've gone out, right-sized the aircraft, right-sized the marketplace, and right-sized the different destinations. And I'll mention this in a second. And just real brief again in trends, as the 50-seat and lower continue to shrink, there's still opportunity, but now you start to increase the size. The large RJs, the 70 to 80-seat range, they're replacing on the longer flights. The reason is a lower cost of operating with opportunity to fill the seats. And then your flight frequency, again, what used to be 5, 6, 7 times a day in certain markets, the new schedules may have 3, 4, or 5 flights, and those things will always continue to happen. Airlines are very good at going out there and changing their schedule. The reason they're always out there changing their schedule is they're trying to tweak and go out there and fine-tune their schedule so that the information and the schedule they have out there is very optimal. The 50-seat jets, well, for the most part, the 50-seat jets work very good in markets less than 700 miles. Once you get down to 700 miles, you lose your cost opportunities. And then, as mentioned already, the low-cost carriers, they're out there. Again, they're the ones that grow the most, but definitely the ultra-low-cost carriers, they're not out there really for the business consumer. There are some exceptions, naturally, but for the most part, the low-cost carriers are out there trying to find opportunities with a discretionary income leisure-type passenger. So just real brief, I want to talk about a couple examples. You go back to Delta at Cincinnati and looking at 2008, at that point, you had 125 nonstop markets being flown by Delta Connect, and different carriers under the Delta umbrella, 125 nonstop markets, and 5 of those were to the European markets. So you fast forward, and this is based on what they have fleeted and allocated for next year. They have gone from 125 nonstop markets to, right now, 44. Huge reduction. So as they reduced the schedule in Cincinnati, well, the international is down just 1 market to Europe. What was 5? So you can see the difference. You can go back and say, okay, at the point that it was 125 nonstop markets, they pared down the flying to 44. And this is post-merger with Northwest. And the fact is that they pared down the flying to match opportunities and to maximize their revenues. Is the fact that Cincinnati losses, while they maintain the Detroit hub for the Midwest opportunities to flow across Detroit, which they gained with the Northwest merger, to pare down the Cincinnati flying. So even though Cincinnati still has some nonstop markets, it's mostly gone to a more of an O&D basis. There is some flow across Cincinnati, but it's mostly the local demand. Well, what happens in the marketplace is that another carrier sees it as opportunity. So then he comes in and says, okay, here, you look at Cincinnati and Allegiant Air. Well, a year ago, there was no service. They come in, they see, oh, there's opportunity, so they sample the market. Well, as of now, for 2015, they've got 7 nonstop markets planned, and these are all mostly less than daily. But as I mentioned earlier, with Allegiant, it's all about the discretionary. So these are all primarily leisure-type destinations, less than daily. Same thing with Frontier. They see opportunity. You go back to a couple years ago, Frontier had no service in the Cincinnati area. Well, for 2015, they've grown that, and they anticipate having 10 nonstop markets, primarily less than daily and leisure-type destinations for the most part. Some exceptions, but it's mostly leisure. And what Frontier sees in Cincinnati is there could be more frequency within each of the markets, as well as more destinations added as they grow the Cincinnati opportunities for the carrier. Cleveland. You go back to almost 10 years ago, United Continental, before the merger, Continental had, with the total Continental United, there was 83 different markets that flew nonstop. Well, Continental and United merged. Lo and behold, Cleveland and Chicago, it gave the United parent company a lot of flow for the Midwest. Well, what happens is United comes in, they start to pare down Cleveland because they're just tweaking out the schedule, again, to optimize their revenues. Opportunity, in a sense, you don't want to have too many connections. Case in point, you've got opportunity to fly between Montreal, connecting over Cleveland to L.A. Well, you can do the same thing on United versus Chicago. So what United does, they go in, they right-size the schedule and tweak out Cleveland, so it goes from 83 nonstop markets. So for 2015, it'll be just 26. And it goes back that these are primarily built for the local passenger, just the O&D passenger. There will be some changes going forward naturally, but this lays out what they anticipate laying out there for the 2015 travel period. Well, what happens, again, as the Cleveland service gets reduced on United, Frontier sees it as a great opportunity. So it goes back several years ago, Frontier had just one nonstop market at Cleveland. Well, they decided to grow the market, and based upon what they have out there right now, they've got 14 nonstop markets planned at this point for 2015, and they anticipate same thing with Cincinnati, adding more markets as well as adding frequency within the given markets, because most of these markets they have out there are less than daily. They're flying 2 to 3 days a week, with some exceptions going daily and others, but for the most part, it's an opportunity to go out there after begin the discretionary passenger. And then we talk about the fuel spike of 2008. Go back in 2007. At that point, this is mostly U.S. Airways, but American U.S. Airways, this is their nonstop markets out of Las Vegas. Back in 2007, they had 67 markets that were flown nonstop out of Vegas. It was like their midnight operation. But it traveled, they carried traffic in, so it was mostly local, but they flew traffic and connected traffic across the Las Vegas hub. But it goes back that because of oil prices, and at that point, U.S. Airways, right-sizing their fleet, well, Vegas went from 67 nonstop markets to what's planned now for next year is just 9. And if you look at those 9 markets that American/U.S. Airways have, it's strictly to their hubs. So it's only going, it's mostly local naturally, but the connecting traffic to flow over the, case in point, the Miami hub for South America, Latin, Dallas-Fort Worth for the Midwest, and then Charlotte for the East Coast. So you can see how they've gone through just the flow to the hubs, and it's gotten rid of some of their excess capacity. So in turn, over that same time, the likes of Allegiant, Spirit, Frontier have gone in there and grown their Vegas operations to the benefit of what was lost over when U.S. Airways and American pulled down. Now for the Florida individuals, and this is something that lays out. This is Southwest, and again, things have changed. So as you remind yourself, the one constant throughout this entire industry is this change, the schedule changes. schedule changes are always done because is there a better place to put that equipment? At times yes, sometimes no. But with Southwest, back in 2010, right after they announced the merger with AirTran, that's why Key West is in there, these are the nonstop markets they had. They had 8 nonstop markets during 2010 that was flown with mainline jet within the state of Florida. Well, because they're out there merging with AirTran, they're out there tweaking their schedule, they're out there trying to optimize the opportunity going forward. Right now, as of 2015, Southwest is down just to 1 nonstop market in the state of Florida. Well, why is that? Well, to optimize their network, they have one thing that stands out. Again, it could be other areas, but it's just concentrating on Dallas Love. Back in 2010, they were just roughly about 15 nonstop markets that Southwest flew in and out of Dallas Love. And you have to realize, at that point, they were limited because of the Wright Amendment. They weren't allowed to fly beyond certain points nonstop. About 2010, they were able to connect passengers, or at least price out passengers to the system for the most part. But up until now, they're really limited as to where they could fly. So as the Wright Amendment basically goes removed, Southwest has taken a lot of their equipment throughout the system. They've gone, they anticipate going from the 15 nonstop markets until next year. You can see they've really grown the Love Field operation. So they've gone from, again, 15 to right now 33 announced nonstop markets. So that equipment has to come from somewhere. So they pull down flying out of the likes of Intra-Florida, as well as some southeast markets and northeast frequencies to help fund the Dallas Love. Well, they've closed down they announced the closure of 3 cities to help fund the equipment elsewhere. So again, they are growing at LaGuardia, they are growing at Reagan National, but for the most part what stands out is the Dallas Love growth. And then here, again, airlines are very proactive for the most part, and sometimes they're reactive. Well, North Dakota, and this goes back to this is something that's really interesting, because the oil shales and the growth of that industry, basically North Dakota has the fastest growing GDP of any state in the union. Unemployment is non-existent. Jobs are very easy to have in North Dakota. Well, go back to this schedule. And again, this is all based upon planning, retaining service, expanding service. North Dakota, back in 2006, it lists out here, you had 19 different markets that were flown in North Dakota, and basically the majority of the markets in North Dakota were on 19 to 30 seat prop equipment. There are exceptions. You did have mainline service in the likes of Fargo, Bismarck, Minot, Grand Forks at times. But what has happened, because of all the growth volume of customers as well as the revenues and potential revenues that airlines can gain, right now what used to be 19 nonstop markets, for 2015, North Dakota has grown. They're going to have 36 nonstop markets. You can see they've added the likes of Dallas, Houston, Atlanta, Florida. You've gone up to 36. But the other thing that stands out is every airport in the state of North Dakota now has at least regional jet service. So there's no props in the North Dakota state because supply and demand. There's more demand than there's supply because there's so much opportunity for growth. So that's why airlines have reacted very proactively to the state of North Dakota to take advantage of that. So in a nutshell, that basically just brings us forward to attracting and securing airline service. So what we want to do is look at 6 specific areas: create air service strategy, identify and rank the opportunities, build the business case, present the business case, launch service or retain service, and then monitor performance. The one thing about monitoring performance is you always want to make sure to keep track of what's going on, because once you start service, it doesn't mean it's going to last. Airlines change schedules whenever they need to, so they can really make sure they're taking care of them to go out there and look at different factors of planning. And the things that stand out in this, in factors for different airline planners and schedulers, they're going to look at historical opportunities. They're going to look at special events, seasonality, Florida, February 15th, President's Day weekend through April 30th. That's the peak of the peak for Florida. But what about the West Coast? Well, California, June through August is the mostly peak season for that area. But you always have holidays, special events, conventions that stand out. The fact is that you can look at your marketplace, and every carrier, every airport with those carriers, there's always opportunity to make sure you're looking at special events. It could be a special event just to your city. The likes of South Bend, Indiana, in the fall, every other Friday, there's a great demand coming in to South Bend, leaving on Sunday. Well, they're coming in to watch the Notre Dame football. Same thing happens in the likes of Tallahassee with Florida State or Gainesville. There's opportunities to come in. Well, special events can happen throughout, so airlines plan for that. Airports plan for it. Daytona 500. That kicks off peak season. Every February, mid-February, Daytona 500, the majority of the demand, no matter how many seats you put out there, the majority of the demand will drive, but you take advantage of the traffic that will flow to Daytona. They'll flow to Orlando as overflow, so there's opportunity there. But special events stand out. Super Bowl. Every February, the Super Bowl is being changed to a new city. So last year, the Super Bowl, which was in New York City, this coming year, the Super Bowl is going to be held in Phoenix, Arizona. So airlines have already planned for opportunity. So they go out there, they do extra sections, they add extra service prices because supply and demand, prices go up. Not unlike hotel prices go up. It's all based upon opportunity to maximize their revenues. So the Super Bowl, the two teams that are coming to the Super Bowl won't be known until 2 weeks prior, but throughout their network, there's opportunity throughout the entire system to flow traffic to and from Phoenix for that entire weekend. So that's why special events stand out, and airlines try to match capacity as much as possible with demand. So you create air service strategy, getting back to the issue at hand. With that, it just lays out, and these are just bullet points to discuss, but you want to define your catchment area. Basically, a given city, how far out do you pull? How much of your service is leaked? How much of your service is retained? These are the things that stand out. You look at a way of creating and a market. Basically, just look at the marketplace. What could really happen? Analyze your catchment area, as mentioned. Then create a development plan. So you go into certain cities, and just use an example for the upper Midwest. There's a city that has regional jet legacy carrier to and from Chicago 4 times a day. They also have less than daily nonstop service to Florida. So on a monthly, quarterly, annual basis, not only are the Chicago flights in 90% full or better, but their Florida flights are at least 90% full. Well, that's great, but then you look at the true market, and even though they're exceeding 90%, which is phenomenal, they're still leaking the majority of the traffic to other airports because they have a lack of capacity. So those are things to always look at. Even though your loads are good, is there opportunity to grow it? So that's why you want to look at, what's your plan, and working with the different carriers is always making sure you discuss with them the opportunities for growing. And you want to always make sure that you have the aircraft available that can be given to you, but it doesn't always work out that way. Every airport out there wants to have a 5 o'clock flight to a business sector or a hub, but the problem is not enough aircraft out there at that hour. So it's always going to be based upon which one has the most optimal, as well as does it fit into the schedule properly. Secondly, I define and rank the opportunity. So it goes back to the same thing, mentions the list. Do you want to go out there and identify where there's gaps? So using that one example in the upper Midwest, there's gaps going north, south, east, and west. So there's opportunity. So you then work with the carrier, you work with the airport, you work with the community as to what you can do to help grow that given area. And then build the business case. You go into it, and you lay out what opportunities there are. Well, as you rank out your top opportunities, okay, do you want to go to Chicago? Do you want to go to Atlanta? Do you want to go to Detroit or a different hub type operation, or do you want to overfly? Do you want to have nonstop service that goes between your airport and truly to the destination market of the beaches, the golf courses, the Las Vegases of the world? So as you build the business case, you put together based upon a lot of the history. You're always going to know what what the DOT gives you on a quarterly basis, you're going to know what your top markets are. You're going to know what your load factors are for the different airlines that are flying to and from your airport. So then you present all this information and put together. Then, ideally, and this is what is always important, is you always want to make sure that if the opportunity presents itself is talk to an airline, not always about new service, but what about the existing service? What can you do better to at least increase capacity, increase market share, things like that. So we're going to talk to the carriers about the good and bad. So at this point, you just really sit down and, when possible, talk to the different airlines out there. And then, again, if you're going into new service, well then the idea is then you work with the community, you work with the airline planners, and you work with your staff to go out there, develop a plan, make sure that the community is well aware of it, make sure that the plan's out there in place. So make sure that when you're flying between point A and point B, it's when the passenger wants to fly. Adding service at 3 a.m. on a short-haul market is not always going to be the most optimal, but you plan the schedule properly. So it goes back to that. When you talk to different airlines, you talk to different carriers, if it's a leisure-type market, you have a schedule that's daily, you have a schedule that's less than daily. And these are things that stand out, opportunities like that. One prime example is in the Panhandle of Florida. You've got latest study, you've got over 14 million people a year that come down to the Panhandle, come down to the beaches, they come down to Destin. Well, of the 14 million customers, less than 10% are flying. It's because of lack of capacity. So these are things you build a business case to go to the different airlines to see, hey, will you add more service into the likes of Fort Walton Beach? Because if people are coming down to go to Destin, is there opportunity to grow that marketplace, especially if that's where they want to go. So you look at the Panhandle, opportunity there. So you go back to different carriers and present the case, and that way they can see the great opportunities. Because a lot of airline planners, they'll see case after case after case, but by putting your best case forward, you can show them opportunity to grow that type market. West Coast, about every place you look at, wherever there's a true catchment area, there's opportunity to grow the marketplace. Look at the case in point of Vegas. Vegas continues to at times grow because there's so much opportunity for demand, mostly leisure demand in that place. So then, again, the one most important thing is you go through these different sectors of creating the air service strategy, identifying and ranking the opportunities, building the case, presenting the case, launching service. The one that really stands out is monitor the performance. Be sure you're aware of it, because all too often airlines may change the schedule, and the airport managers and directors are the last to know because no one took the time to pick up the phone and call the airport to say, hey, we're going to be changing the schedule. Well, it's always good to know what's going on, so it's always by monitoring the performance, by getting with the carriers and finding out how they're performing on a, when possible, monthly basis. You'll know what you're doing on a quarterly basis, but because there's a lag, you don't always get information until after the point. 3 or 4 months after the end of the quarter is when that information gets released. It's always important to see how the market is performing through the life cycle of the flight itself. So in a nutshell, it's important to look at airlines will always match capacity with demand. It's all based on supply and demand. They're always going to have a business type market versus leisure. So it's going to be elastic is going to be your leisure, inelastic is going to be your type business markets. But a lot of airports out there will have a business market, but it gets mixed in with leisure demand just because of if there's not enough demand for the business component, then the lower end fares open up to offset the lack of demand. If there's enough demand, prices go up. If there's enough demand, prices go up. If there's lack of demand, prices go down. So it's always good to be sure that you're always working with the different airline planners to make sure that they're well aware of what's going on as well. Because not always will they understand a local event, a special event in your community. So they'll know the major events of the Christmas, New Year's holiday splits, the Easters, the Passovers, the President's Day. They know the high-level major events and holidays. They're not always sure what's going on in the local communities. So it's always good to make sure you communicate with the airline planners whenever possible. So in a summary, when you look at this, basically the leakage and retention analysis. Know the market catchment area. It's always good to know, if possible, what your market catchment area is, which includes a leakage report. And what a leakage report does, every airport knows 100% of what the demand is, what flows through them, but they don't know what traffic did not flow through there. So a leakage report, a leakage analysis, it goes out there, it looks at a given year of ticketing data, given your zip code and your true population base, and takes a look at where your traffic is flowing to. So going back to that one example in the upper Midwest, that study showed the airport was doing quite well with the flights and filling the seats, but at the end of the day, they weren't capturing the true volume they could, so there's a lot of opportunity for growth there. So a leakage report is always important. Secondly, increase support and usage of the existing service. It's always good, basically, support what you have in front of you, making sure that the local community, the local businesses are well aware of the service and that they support whenever possible that opportunity to fly in and out of your airport. And then airline current and future schedule impact. Well, when you've got a 5 o'clock flight to a business center, you're happy, but what happens when an airline changes the schedule and now it's a 3 p.m. or it's a 7 p.m.? It's all outside of the true optimal period. Those are things that I always make aware of. So a schedule report, schedule impact will show you that type of information. And not sure what happened, but I just got bounced out. Okay, all right, here, I'm back. Okay, so it just shows that support the existing service, use it or lose it type information. New route analysis. It's always good to look at your marketplace. Again, the new route analysis is supported at best when you've got a leakage report that's up to date. Now, a leakage report every couple of years is a good time to run it. That way you know exactly what your true market opportunities are. And then as you create new market opportunities, the incentives. What are your airport costs, both short-term and long-term? What used to be years ago, airlines really didn't look at the cost of operating. Well, because of more and more everything being very limited on maximizing revenues, airliners, the planners themselves are out there looking at ways to improve, which means what can you give them as a cost incentive, and at times a cost incentive may get you service versus your competition 35 miles down the road. Again, short-term and long-term. So your short-term inside 2 years, and then long-term, how's the cost structure going to change? And then the MRG, at that point, certain airlines will not take an MRG or minimum revenue guarantee. Other airlines use it as basically as a stepping stone to make sure that market exceeds outside of their initial startup costs. So all depends on the carrier, the market, and the destination if they're more concerned about their short to long-term costs to get going versus the MRG. They're equally important, and at the end of the day, they make a world of difference to the different planners. On top of that, presenting business cases is always good, but it's also looking at ways you can just, again, going back to the airline planners and talk to them about how is my existing market working? How can I add more service? How can I exist or continue with at least the same amount of service through the shoulder periods? A lot of airlines at times will pare down some of the flying in the off-peak. Well, that's based upon historical. Well, at times it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. If I don't fly in the month of September, well, there's no demand. But if I try to fly in September and try to build some demand, because there's always opportunity out there. So you're always trying to work with the airlines to add service where there's maybe a gap or two. And then the other thing that stands out in summary is the community support initiatives. A lot of airports really get great buy-in with the media, with the community, both the public and private sectors in each of the areas, that they really support the local service, and that's always go to your airport as book first. So it's always the first look, first opportunity is always important, because once an individual books another airport, well, then you've lost that revenue completely. So those are the things that stand out. The summary is know your market, support the existing service as you grow, and potentially add new markets into the future. Michael?
I'm here, Mike. Thank you so very much. I appreciate the wealth of information you shared. In fact, I was thinking that I wish I had had access to this webinar when I was responsible for air service development in Des Moines 15 years ago. It's very informative. We now have opportunity for questions from participants. In fact, I already have a couple that have been submitted. And so if you're ready, Mike, let me throw the first one at you. Somebody wants to know what are the primary drivers for airline planners when they are reviewing or deciding new market opportunities?
What a lot of the airline planners, what they get in front of them is they're very, very knowledgeable of what has happened. They're very knowledgeable of what's taken place, of what on their airline. So they'll know, and case in point, just using point A to point B. If airline A and airline B are flying between point A and point B, they both know their market share. They know their average fares. But a lot of airline planners, outside of what they see in front of them through DOT quarterly stats, between every month they know load factors, so those are released as well. What they don't know, like a better term, what they don't know is what they don't know, which is the leakage analysis. Airline planners, because they're limited on what they can do, bear in mind they've got hundreds and hundreds of markets probably being flown already that they're responsible for. They're always on time constraints. But what's really important to a lot of airline planners is, why should I add service? Well, maybe it's a new factory coming in town. Maybe it's a new business. Maybe their college is expanding. Maybe it's a special event. Those are things that stand out. But the leakage analysis, that is something that really helps out a lot of airline planners, because this is something brand new to them that they don't normally have in front of them. So that basically stands out.
All right, thank you very much. Another participant wants to know what are the differences between ULCC and LCC?
Outside of the U, more different than just that. Ultra low cost carrier, that is the likes of Allegiant, Frontier nowadays, as well as Spurred. Spurred, at times, they'll fly multiple markets daily, multiple times, but for the most part, an ultra low cost carrier, the three that stand out, Frontier, Allegiant, and Spurred, is they fly less than daily to mostly leisure markets. Now, there is some exception, because as Frontier is transitioning to an ultra low cost carrier, they still have a lot of markets they fly multiple times a day. Denver, LAX stands out. 5-6 times a day they fly. Well, as they transition to an ultra low cost carrier, that may change, but it may not. So what really stands out is the ultra low cost carrier will have low ball fares at times, but they also have ancillary opportunities to offset some of the low ball fares. So like Spurred. Spurred really buys into having a very low fare at the same time that you actually go out there and purchase the items that you want. Maybe you don't want to have a bag, so you don't pay for the bag. Maybe you don't want to have a rent-a-car. Maybe you don't want to have a advanced seat assignment. So that's what the difference are for the most part. Now, it's a hybrid that's always going in place, but those are the three that stand out as an ultra-low-cost carrier. But then you got your low-cost carriers, like of JetBlue. JetBlue, there are some exceptions, but most of JetBlue's system-wide schedule is based upon nonstop service multiple times a day. Same with Southwest. Southwest will fly nonstop markets multiple times daily. And even though they may have a couple less than daily type markets, but it's mostly they're out there for that business type consumer as well as the leisure. So those are two major differences between LCC and ultra LCC.
Another participant has submitted what would be an appropriate follow-up to that, Mike, which is, in your opinion, which ULCC is expanding quickest, and which one would you feel is looking specifically at expanding in Florida?
Well, one that Frontier has made several announcements of late. They're going in there, added the Cincinnati, the Cleveland. They've really grown quite quickly, quite successfully based on the numbers. The likes of Trenton. But the ones that stand out in the likes of Florida, well, Allegiant Air, otherwise known as Allegiant Travel Company, they've gone into Punta Gorda, and Punta Gorda is the fastest growing airport in the state of Florida right now. They've gone in and grown it. What used to have just maybe eight flight a day. Well, the airport itself is now expanding, so that part's growing, as well as the Sanford and St. Pete, as well as Fort Lauderdale for Allegiant continues to grow, but the one that stands out is Punta Gorda. So within Florida, then you also have Spirit. The fact that Spirit continues to add service, but lately, what Spirit is doing is mostly adding major market to major market. So with Frontier and Allegiant, what separates them from Spirit is the fact that they tend to go into the smaller type markets to a destination, whereas Spirit of late, probably because their A321 aircraft has more seats, they've been going into more major market to major market, trying not to not as much stimulate, but more to skim off of the competition.
Alrighty, I have another question for you here, Mike, that's taking the dialogue in a little different direction. This participant says, as a general aviation trying to become a commercial service, what is the process to get that first letter of intent from an airline?
The important thing, if you want to go to scale, well, the important thing is there opportunity? Is there a lack of capacity in your catchment area? If you're across the street from existing, that may not happen quickly, naturally. But if you are separated from different airports, absolutely there's opportunity, especially if you can build a business case. So you look at certain sections of the country, definitely you look at the state of North Dakota. What they've done quite well is they've really beefed up service, but they've all been existing airports. So the likes of Trenton has done well. They used to have commercial service years ago, lost it, they gained it back to Frontier over the past couple of years have done it. But you definitely want to sit down with an airline and show them something like that. You definitely want to have a leakage analysis just to show what's coming out of your zip code area. So the traffic itself is say you're between two major airports, but there's a distance between those airports. You go out there and show how much traffic is coming out of your local area. And that way different carriers can see that as opportunity to grow. Because what it would have put this way, if Delta Airlines compared to American Airlines side by side, and Delta sees that there's this airport opportunity in the middle of nowhere, or at least removed from different commercial airports, yet they're not getting their fair share of demand, that means they can come in and gain market share and actually grow the market based on what they're not getting today.
Thank you. Have another question on another topic. This one deals with airline incentives, Mike. And this participant says, airline incentives are designed to help minimize the risk for the airlines. What is your perspective on how effective airline incentives are either in retaining or recruiting new service?
As airlines come in, again, they'll come in and they've got 10 great ideas, yet they've only got 3 aircraft for those 10 great ideas. So that means only 3 of the 10 will succeed or will get the service. Well, what comes down to it is based upon if two airports have equal opportunity for a schedule, equal opportunity for expected demand and expected average fares, the one deciding factor can and all too often is the cost of startup. What kind of incentives can you give? And airports are limited as what they can give. You have basically a 2-year startup period to get going. But then in that 2-year period, you want to make sure that you've grown the market enough so the airline stays around, because you don't want an airline come in, take advantage of MRG or that minimum revenue guarantee, and then once it's gone, just leave service. You want to make sure that minimum revenue guarantee, it definitely is out there to help bridge the startup costs so that airline sees it as a viable opportunity, not only 2 years down the road, but 3, 4, 5, 6 years down the road. That way they can see phase 2 for growth. So a phase 1 gets you the initial service, but then go back and say, if all goes well, phase 2 will give you this type market or this type equipment or this type added capacity, things like that.
Okay. Thank you. This question is very Florida specific. It says, it would appear that Southwest will soon considerably cut back its interstate service in Florida. Well, based on your map, they already have, Mike. The participant wants to know, which carrier do you think will come in and pick up the slack?
Right now, what I believe, and this is just looking at the marketplace, you've got, right now in the state of Florida, you've got Spirit based in Fort Lauderdale or Miramar, right outside Fort Lauderdale. They fly just two markets. They fly once a day to Tampa. They fly twice a day to Orlando, to and from Fort Lauderdale, to help flow traffic across their hub and spoke operation there. So, and the fact that I don't see them growing Intra-Florida anytime soon. What I do see is like that you got Silver Airways down there where they can start connecting more and more of the dots and take advantage. Basically, take their show before. As one airline pulls down, another airline sees it as an opportunity to grow it. And the one that really stands out on a low cost for intra-Florida service is potentially JetBlue. And the reason I say that, JetBlue, as of, I believe it's November, but fourth quarter, put it that way. I guarantee it's fourth quarter. JetBlue is going to start flying twice a day between Jacksonville and Fort Lauderdale with their ERJ. And what happens, again, it's going to help connect their traffic across Fort Lauderdale, but the other thing that stands out is for the next couple of years, JetBlue anticipates growing Fort Lauderdale to over 100 flights a day. And as you grow the marketplace, well, then you start to add more and more spokes to help flow the traffic. And I think JetBlue could very easily connect dots in their existing Florida network to Fort Lauderdale to help flow traffic to their connecting points across Fort Lauderdale to the Caribbean and then Latin America as well, or Central and Latin.
Thank you, Mike. Our time together is rapidly running out. A couple things. One, several participants have wanted to know if the PowerPoint slides are available. I just want everybody to know, I think maybe Stephanie mentioned this already, that today's webinar is being recorded and will be available in a few days on the CUTR website. Secondly, questions that have been submitted that we haven't had time to answer will be captured and will be shared with Mike, and we'll do our best to respond to everybody. Thirdly, I see Steph has posted the evaluation form on the screen, so if you'd be kind enough to complete that and submit that back to us, we'd greatly appreciate that. And let me ask you kind of the final question here, Mike, which is a segue from what you were just talking about. One of the participants wants to know, so what do you think about Silver Airlines?
It's evolving. The fact that Silver has, well, reduced a lot of their Northeast and Midwest type flying, what they had over Cleveland and what they had over Dulles. Well, what Silver has is, again, this is my humble opinion, the fact that they could actually grow intra-Florida flying because there's so much capacity has come out as these markets continue to grow now. Is I believe that Silver got great opportunity, especially since they brought in some very good VPs and new bosses to help really take advantage of their marketplace and opportunities.
Very good. Well, with that, ladies and gentlemen, it's 1 o'clock. I want to bring conclusion to our webinar. Mike, again, thank you so very much for the excellent presentation. For all of you from across Florida and throughout the Midwest who participated today, thank you very much, and we look forward to seeing and hearing from you on another CUTR webcast in the near future. Be well.